Great. All right. Thank you, Liz. That was a very good overview of the procurement workflows in general, but obviously focusing on vendor onboarding, the challenges and the kind of challenges that large customers run into, as well as what happens after onboarding. How do you manage the vendors and make sure that they have the right tools so that they can self-service themselves. So that was a very good end-to-end overview. Uh, and in this part of the webinar, I'm going to walk you through the demo of our application that helps with some of these challenges. So what I'm showing here is our application called OnRamp. OnRamp is a Atlassian Jira Service Management application. So it sits on top of Jira and JSM. Uh, Customers can install it through the standard Atlassian marketplace. And once they install, they can access the app through the apps menu. I'll give you a quick view into the application and then go into the business flow as far as what the vendor might see or the procurement manager might see, etc., before coming back to the app to see how things tie together. In OnRamp, we have the concept of flows, which is a sequence of steps that forms a business process. So for example, here we have created a couple of procurement related flows. One is vendor onboarding, another one is intake to procure. And similarly, there are a bunch of other flows as well that one can create. Let's take a look at the vendor onboarding flow. So the idea here is we have a triggering point for this particular flow. You can select from any number of triggers. So we have integrations to more than 50 enterprise systems, both HR and financials. So for example, you could connect to Workday, SAP, etc. Or your triggering point could be a form. In this particular case, given its vendor onboarding, I'm going to demo a life cycle where a vendor is submitting a form in order to trigger their onboarding for the particular customer. So as Liz talked about the form, how simple it can be in order to make it as frictionless as possible for the vendor. And once the vendor submits that form, what are the actions that need to be taken in order for that vendor to be activated? That's the flow that we'll walk you through. So you select Jira or request type in the trigger, and you can then select any number of tasks from our task library. So we provide a bunch of tasks. Some of them are automated. For example, if you need to create an email account for the vendor, we can automatically set that up by connecting to your Azure AD, Google Workspace, Okta, or any other identity management system. We support a bunch of them as well. You could set up tasks such as procurement review, where your procurement manager might want to take a look at this particular vendor's background, perhaps look at their TPRM reports, which is the third-party risk management. Our application provides integrations into the popular TPRM systems as well, so that you can have quick access to the risk profile of this particular vendor. So that kind of a task where you are reviewing the risk could be manual. But once that review is done and let's say the procurement manager approves it, you can then use our application to create the vendor automatically in a bunch of systems. So for instance, here, just as an example, we are creating the supplier in Salesforce, Coupa, and Workday. Again, in your organization, if you're using any of these systems, rather than doing a double entry in all of these systems, you can use the application to automatically create them. You can then set up the portal access for the supplier. We are going to revisit this because this is where once portal access is given to the supplier, they will be enabled with self-service. So one of the things that Liz discussed is around the ability for a vendor to look at their own POs, invoices, being able to update their information, whether it's bank account information or adding additional contacts. All of those tasks can be completed in the JSM portal. So we'll walk you through that. And similarly, you can set up a bunch of other tasks as part of OnRamp. And once you configure this here, whenever a new form by a vendor is submitted, we are able to review it, create the necessary subtasks, as well as automatically completing some of the tasks as well. So now if I go to the portal, so here is a portal that we set up for this demo. And in this portal, it's an external facing portal for all vendors. And here we have enabled a few different forms. For example, vendor survey or vendor security assessment, onboarding a new vendor, which is what we are going to walk through, as well as a few other actions that vendors can take. So these are all, for example, vendor security assessment. We provide these forms as part of the JSM portal so that you can now send a vendor, let's say every 6 months or every year, a questionnaire, a security questionnaire that allows them to complete it and then allows you to then look at and ensure that the vendor is following the right security protocols. So here we have a standard questionnaire that customers can send to the vendors. Let's take a look at onboarding a new vendor. So again, this is a form that is completely configurable and can be set up in the right amount of detail that allows you to onboard the vendor. So let's say this form is sent to the vendor and they start entering their information. I'm just going to select a few fields here. You could make the form interactive. So for example, if you select US or based on the country, the relevant fields get visible. So for US, obviously you will need a TIN, so that's enabled. You can set up contact details. Some of these fields also have validations, whether within the form or it can also connect to external systems to validate it. Banking details also can be securely retrieved from the form. And once the form is submitted, the rest of the process, I'll show you what that looks like. We also have the ability to validate some of the forms, the banking details that the vendor might submit. For example, if you have US and you ask for a routing number, then the ability to verify if the routing number is correct or not, some of those validations we are able to perform. I'm just going to leave that information for now and then submit it. So now, once the vendor has submitted the form, you can start reviewing it and make sure that everything looks good. As a procurement manager now, I'm going to review the form. And this is the view that as a procurement manager, I can see what exactly the form that was submitted by the vendor. Make sure everything looks good. If there are any specific details that are missing, they can connect to the vendor through the same ticket. So when they respond here, the vendor will be able to look at it and they can also update the ticket. This is the way in which a simple form can be submitted. Most of the what you have seen here is part of the JSM portal functionality. The forms, you can obviously customize it to meet your needs. And once the procurement manager has reviewed the details and they feel like they have enough information, they can go here and start the onboarding of the vendor by clicking on Start Onboarding. This is where our application on-ramp comes into picture. So what is happening behind the scenes for those of you who are familiar with Jira and JSM is that we are calling our application's post function as part of this workflow. So when you have your workflow set up to start onboarding, we are calling the on-ramp workflow and creating the tasks that were previously defined. Let me show you one of the previously created tasks. So this is another vendor that we onboarded, let's say last week. Here you'll see that the form details are available, and these are the form details that the vendor submitted. And then you can see the list of all the individual tasks that were previously defined in on-ramp. So this is the exact list of tasks that we see here. And we are able to take what was defined in this flow and created the list of tasks as per that definition. And as I was saying earlier, you could make some of these manual if it is create supplier in Salesforce, where it can be completely automated. And these kind of actions can be taken by our application, and making the dual entry for multiple systems redundant. That's no longer needed. Our application also connects to DocuSign and other e-sign applications if you want to send a final contract for signatures to the vendor, you will be able to do that as well. You can also schedule time for feedback, whether it is quarterly or annually. So these are tasks that can be set up at the initial stages as part of onboarding, and our app is going to create the relevant tasks at the right time so that users know whom to reach out for feedback, etc. The same concept can be used for security questionnaires as well. We have some customers who said they like to send security questionnaires once in 6 months, for example. In that case, you can schedule those kind of security questionnaires to be sent automatically through our app. So that's an overview of how users can define what are the steps that are part of a vendor onboarding. And then they can set up the various forms as part of the vendor management portal. Any number of forms. We provide out-of-the-box forms, but these can be completely configurable. And finally, once the form is submitted, you can take the relevant action. Based on the type of form, you can take an action, whether it is creation of additional tasks or automatically completing some of them. And finally, as a vendor, we talked briefly about how a vendor can do self-service. How can they get questions answered without being a burden on the procurement team? As a vendor, when I log into the portal, I'll be able to access on-ramp through the menu. And here, they'll be able to get some basic information about their payments and invoices. So here you can see that for this particular vendor, it shows who are the contacts. It shows the list of purchase orders that are assigned to them, as well as their payment status for the various invoices. This is something that in this particular demo, we are pulling from Workday, where Workday is the backend financial system. And this allows the vendor to get some information about their POs, invoices, payments, And hopefully that addresses some of their questions. If not, they obviously have the ability to submit a question here, or they can also leverage an AI agent to get some of their questions answered. That's probably the AI agent part we'll cover in a future webinar. But this is something that most vendors have questions about. Common questions can be automated, or it can be provided in a self-service manner, especially customers who have hundreds of vendors. This kind of a self-service option reduces the burden on the procurement team. That's an overview of what we wanted to show as far as the app and the functionality for vendor onboarding and ongoing vendor management.